Principles of Business Information Systems. The chapter we are covering today is about computer networks. The principles of this chapter is effective communication and essential to organizational success. Communications technology let more people send and receive all forms of information over great distances. The internet is like many other technologies. It provides wide range of services, some of which are effectively and practical for the use today. Others are still evolving, and still others will fade away from the lack of use. Because of the internet and the World Wide Web, we are becoming more universally used and accepted for the business use. Management services and speed, privacy, and security issues must be continually be addressed and resolved. So in this chapter, we are talking about the telecommunications and different technologies that we use in order to communicate over long distances of time. Now we know that regardless what kind of business we are in, the technology plays an important role. And in order to keep our databases and information systems connected, we need to rely on telecommunications and different mediums of communications in order to effectively transmit the data from one place to another. Now we'll be talking about different technologies which are used. It would include 3G, 4G, 5G, LAN, MAN, and WAN, etc. Different technologies which helps today in running our everyday business needs. Telecommunications, the electronic transmission of signals for communications by each means as telephone, radio, or television. So if we are communicating through any means like telephone, radio, or television, that's also considered as a way of telecommunications. Telecommunication impacts the business greatly because it lessens the barriers of time and distances, because we are able to send our details from one place to another using the conventional telephone lines or satellite connection, or using the local area network or internet connectivity. As networks are connected from one another and transmit information more freely, a competitive marketplace demands excellent quality and service from all organizations. Since we are heavily dependent on different mediums of communication like 3G, 4G, or 5G, or satellite internet connections, so the speed and reliability of those connections is really important in order to make sure that we are able to reach the databases and application systems that we have deployed. Now in this picture, they are talking about the way it's actually communicating. If a person is sending some information over the telephone lines, we have the telecommunication devices, then we'll be using the normal power lines or the communication for the internet, as well as sometimes we are using the power lines in order to wirelessly transmit the signals from one place to another. Once the message reaches the other part, there will be a device again, which is a telecommunication device, to decode the message, and then it is transferred to the other computer. Then we have synchronous and asynchronous communication. Advances in the telecommunication technology allows us to communicate rapidly with clients and co-workers almost everywhere in the world. Now communication can occur simultaneously, or it can occur as synchronously or asynchronously. Now, the synchronous communication, the receiver gets the message almost instant when it is sent. For example, we are calling using the telephones, or instant messaging, for example, WhatsApp, etc. So whenever we are able to communicate our message directly to the end user instantly, it's called asynchronous communication. They are giving an example of telephone calls and other things like instant messaging. That's considered a mode of synchronous communication. It's called synchronous because we know that the other person has received the message. We can even check, just like in WhatsApp, that the message is received and there is a notification that the person has read the message, or if he or she is online or offline. So that proves and that helps us in business communications as well, that we can make sure that the information that we have conveyed easily has been sent to the other party or not. The same thing happens if we are calling the other person. We can instantly talk to the other person and resolve the things using the communication mediums. The asynchronous communication, there is a measurable delay between the sending and receiving the messages, sometimes hours, days, for example, sending a letter through the post office or email. Now, we cannot deny the importance of a letter or the postal mail, because there are certain documents and things which we need to send it to the other party in form of the actual documents, which has its own worth. If we are sending any transcripts or any things related to the confidential communication between the companies, usually it's in the form of the documents, and that is usually sent out through the postal mail and the conventional way of sending the document. Same goes for the transcripts and the degrees that we acquire, or once we graduate, a university issues us. So the digital format of it is not as acceptable as the printed format, which is an evidence that you have actually completed those things. So that's why synchronous communication is also important. Both types of communications are important in business. Now we have telecommunication media types, but before we can understand the telecommunication media types, we'll have to understand the channel bandwidth. The channel bandwidth is the amount of traffic that particular communication medium can carry. It has a channel bandwidth. First of all, channel bandwidth is the rate in which the data is exchanged over communication channels, usually measured in bits per second. So the more data it can carry, we can say that it is a channel with a broadband communication or with heavy communications. A broadband communication is a telecommunication system in which a very high rate of data exchanges is possible. Just like before we used to use internet using DSL lines, before that we had the dial-up modems. The speed of dial-up modems were far less than the DSL connections. Then we had the 4G and 5G communications, and then the fiber optic connections. So the bandwidth of communication using those communication channels is far higher than the previous communication channels that we were using. Now there is a narrowband communication as well, a telecommunication system that supports much lower rate of data exchange than the broadband connection. Now we have different types of communication mediums that we use. For guided transmission, we have twisted pair cable, which is used for network communication like Cat5 and Cat6 cables. Then we have the coaxial cable, which we used to use with dish antennas and the normal antennas. Then we have fiber optic cables, which are the latest ones we are using these days, which has an excellent speed. And then the broadband over the power lines. If we need to transmit the internet signals over the power lines, then it's called a broadband over power lines. Wireless communications have microwave, terrestrial and satellite links, where we have the small antennas, sort of the dish antennas, which can communicate between the two devices, and we can transmit the signals from there. Then we have 3G and 4G wireless communications. They are mostly related to telecommunication mediums, and the latest one is 5G, with the help of which we can transmit the data at a much higher rate. Then we have the wireless communication, which we are using at home in order to get the signals and to access the internet. Near field communication is usually used for the payments using the mobile cards. We call it NFC as well. Then we have Bluetooth. Its range is limited. We are using it in cars in order to communicate with the communication system or the entertainment system in the cars. Then we have ultra wideband and the infrared communication. Infrared communication is a very small range communication which used to be there in the older mobile phones. Now here, as you can see, this is a twisted pair cable, which is a Cat5 or Cat6 cable, which we are using on our network in order to have the communications. This one is a coaxial cable, which is used on the dish antennas. This cable is still used for the network communication. Of course, the Cat5 and Cat6 twisted pair cables are far cheaper than the coaxial cables. Then we have these fiber optic cables, which we use for communication these days. These are far more expensive as compared to these two cables, because connecting it and disconnecting it and even joining it, we call it splicing, is a bit tricky task as compared to these two things. You need special equipment for that, and of course it is much expensive when it comes to the price. Then we have different telecommunication hardware like modems, multiplexers, front-end processors, private branch exchange, switches and bridges, and different ways through which we communicate over the networks. Now here we are looking at an example that the data transmission is taking place. We'll connect using a modem and we'll use the power lines. At the other end also there will be a modem so that we can have a complete communication between two nodes. Now here they are showing a multiplexer in between, which is using a communication link to a front-end processor, and there is a host computer. So using the multiplexer and a front-end processor, both parties are able to communicate with each other. Now, a network and distributed processing, a computer network consists of communication medium devices and a software needed to connect two or more software system devices together. So we'll be using modem, or we'll be having a router through which we are communicating, and then we need a software and communication devices in order to talk to each other. The computer and the devices on the network are called the network nodes. So the devices that we are connected on the network, the end users, we call their computers as nodes as well. Nodes can share data, information, and processing jobs. So every computer can share the data. It would have some information, and we'll be doing some processing tasks using an ERP or maybe an Excel sheet or anything like that. Organizations can use the network to share hardware programs and databases. So we use the normal network that we have within the buildings in order to share certain information. It could be based on a hardware. We can be using different programs and the databases on the network. Increasingly, businesses are linking computers in a network to streamline work processes and allow employees to collaborate on projects and to grow into an agile, powerful, and creative organization. So we have different means of communication. We'll have different processes. We might be using different communication tools like Zoom or any other communication medium through which we are communicating to other parties. If you are using Microsoft products, we have Microsoft Teams in order to share your screen and to have the remote meetings. Then we can have a more agile approach towards powerful and creative communications if we are talking to different parties and we are sharing the information and the overall growth of the company. Now, network enable the geographically separated work groups to share the information, which foster the teamwork, innovative ideas, and new business strategies. So regardless if you have different business units in different part of the country, you can communicate to the main branch office using the VPN connections, which is a secure connection to connect to a remote office, and you can share the information using those technologies. Now we have local area network. Local area network, all network users within an office building can connect to each other device for rapid communication. For instance, a user in research and development could send a document from her computer to be printed at the printer located in the desktop publishing center. So the main reason that we have the network within the building is that we can easily communicate with the servers or the filers or the printers that we have anywhere else located inside the building. Just to give you an example, that if you have a printer in your office and if it's not working due to any reason and it's connected to the network, you can connect to any other printer within the network and you can continue your printing task using those printers in any other part of the building. That's the main importance of a network, that we can still access the resources of the company using the network connection. Then we have a huge filer usually in the organizations where we are storing most of our stuff, and it's located at a central position. So all of the computers on a local area network will be able to see that storage. So those computers, which are the nodes, will be able to save their data on that central repository and will be able to extract data from there. So that's the main importance of a LAN. Then we have a wide area network. Now keep in mind that local area network is within a building, so it has a limitation of space, that it is only limited to a controlled environment. Wide area network is, for example, if you have a huge network which is connected to different geographical regions in the world, so that network is called a wide area network. They are basically long distance networks used around the world. The actual connection between sites and nodes might be the combination of satellite, microwave cabling. When you make a long distance telephone call or use the internet, you use a WAN connection. Now, in order to connect to the remote locations, sometimes we use the normal internet connection. If it is a secure connection, we use IPVPN circuit, which connects us between the two parties, and we can communicate using those communication channels without compromising our data. So this is a secure mechanism of transmitting the data using the normal conventional connections, when your data is actually encrypted before it leaves your premises and then decrypted again at the other end where you want to receive it. So that's how we are able to communicate using the wide area connections. Now this is a mesh network. A mesh network is a network where all computers are connected to each other. and they are able to communicate even if one source is disconnected. For example, between these two computers, if this connection is down, still this computer can communicate using this computer and can reach this computer. So in a mesh network, all computers are connected to each other. We use mesh networking as well if we want to provide wireless connectivity to different parties within a city. So if they need to access the internet, we'll provide them the nearest access point, which is there near their office, and they'll be able to communicate using the internet provided by that company. Now there are different type of network. There are personal area network, local area network, metropolitan area network, which is within a city, wide area network, that is international, or international networks that we are connecting using the internet, etc. And then we have mesh networking. This is the communication picture, microwave links that we use in order to communicate between two parties. As you can see that there are antennas on each of the towers, and its communication length, which is a line of sight, is about 30 miles. But in these kind of communications, we'll have to make sure that both parties can see each other. Now in these microwave link, there should be a line of sight between the two parties where both must be able to see each other, and the total distance which could be in between them could be 30 miles. If it is more than 30 miles, they'll have to use certain boosters, but that's the throughput, or that the good length or distance between the two parties where they can effectively communicate with each other. Now in this one, they are trying to show the 4G or 5G connection, which we are communicating through the telecommunication medium and a satellite connection. So that gives us a very high speed internet connection, and the distance of the satellite and the earth could be about 35,000 kilometers. Now here we are talking about different network types, like if a person is trying to talk to another person, and we are using the same communication satellites or the communication devices, dish antennas, etc., through which we are able to communicate to the head office, and then you can even communicate with the other offices or the regional divisions which are available in different cities of the country using the telephone lines and the satellite connections, etc. Now we have centralized versus decentralized processing. With centralized processing, all processing occurs in a single location or facility. This approach offers the highest degree of control because a single centrally managed computer performs all the data processing. So if we have an online business where we are selling and selling the items online through our website, we'll have a central database which is located at one location. Since the database is located at a central location, so everything would go over there. Now this gives a highest level of control because everything is going in one database, and if you need to collect any information, that's the point where you'll be going. But in this kind of scenario, the problem is that if there is any natural disasters, calamities, fire or flooding or earthquakes or anything like that, and if your central processing area or the main hub is destroyed, everything will be destroyed as well, provided you don't have any backups, etc. So centralized backup is good, but it has some disadvantages as well. Decentralized processing of the devices are placed at various remote locations. Each computer system is isolated and does not communicate with another system. So you can take an example. For example, Amazon.com is working in Saudi Arabia, in United Arab Emirates, in Qatar, in different parts of the countries, and every Amazon will have its own central database in which it's maintaining its records and the sales, etc. So in case anything goes wrong in one side of the world, it does not affect the overall database and structure of the databases which are there and different locations. Though the companies like Amazon, etc., are using cloud computing and they have multiple instances of their databases, but the decentralized processing helps us in keeping the data separate for each division. Yet they can connect all of those systems in order to do some data warehousing or data mining, etc., in order to get some information out of the data which is stored on those databases. One benefit of distributed processing is that managers can allocate data to the locations that can process it more efficiently, so that if every division has its own data at a different place, the managers can allocate the data, they can have their own budgets for different things, they can do their own processing. Distributed processing can also minimize the consequences of catastrophic events at one location and ensure the uninterrupted systems availability. Client-server systems are The computers or the nodes which are used by the end users is called a client. A server is a place where we are storing stuff. For example, a file server is a server where we are storing all files on the network. Now the files are downloaded by the user, and whenever a user wants to get access to any files, it would have to communicate with the file server. The file server sends the user the entire file that contains the data restored. The user can analyze, manipulate, format, and display and download the data with the program that run on the user personal computer and copy the data back to the server. So that's the main function of a file server, which is managing the files of each user on the network. At the same time, it's making sure that the data of one user is not accessible to any other user on the network. Now this is a client-server communication, where as you can see that there are two servers on right hand side, and these client computers are communicating with these servers. Now these servers could be any kind of servers like web server or an authentication server. The authentication server will make sure that these clients can only access the web server, or their username and passwords are managed by this authentication server, whereas the web server will be displaying the website which will be accessed by these client computers. Multiple computer platforms called the server and dedicated for special purposes. Each server is accessible by the computers on the network. The client requests services from the servers, provides a user interface, and present the results to the users. Now there are different communication software. In communication software, how does an application program request the data from the disk drive on the network through a network operating system? So the network operating system is a system software that controls the computer systems and devices on a network and allow them to communicate with each other. So it makes sure that all devices are reachable to everyone and they are able to communicate. Now there is another thing that is mentioned in your book, which is called network management software, a software that enables and manages the network desktop monitors and use of individual computers and shared hardware such as printers, scan the viruses, and the compliance with the software licenses, etc. So the network management software will take care of the antivirus solutions that you have on the network. It would make sure that all the printers and plotters are available. It can make sure your printing quota is there and that all the devices are available and they are able to communicate with each other. Now in order to get the information about the devices, if they are working or not, we use a protocol on the network which is called Simple Network Management Protocol, SNMP, which keeps on looking for all the devices on the network, and it gives us statistics about those devices, that whether they are working or not. The network operating system is a system software that controls the computer system and devices on a network and allow them to communicate with each other. The network operating system performs the same type of functions on the network as an operating system software does on a computer, such as the memory task and management and coordination of the hardware. So that's the basic difference between a network operating system and a network management system. Next is the internet. The internet is the world's largest computer network, and the data that we transmit and receive on the internet is used or sent through the communication channels. Now, the security of the data is really important when we are transmitting the data on the network. Now, there are two things in the data transmission. It's called encryption and decryption. Now, encryption is the process of converting an original message into a form that cannot be understood, and it can be only opened by the intended receiver. So if we are transmitting any data on the network, we'll encrypt it with a password or a key. So the person who wants to read the data, he must have that key in order to decrypt the data. An encryption key is a variable value that is applied using an algorithm to a set of unencrypted text to produce encrypted text or to decrypt the encrypted text. So it is using different hash codes or the encryption protocol which is used. It is from 56-bit to 256 bits, etc. Depend what kind of communication you are doing. For example, if you want to send a message, John wants to send a message, he'll encrypt the message with a software or a hardware. Then the encrypted message would be decrypted using a decrypting software at the other end to be read by John again. Now the ciphertext is a text which is converted from a normal text. So if the message is encrypted and you'll open it using a notepad or anything, you'll not be able to read the text since it would be appearing in special characters, etc. Now on the internet, actually it is a collection of interconnected networks, all freely exchange the information. Nobody knows exactly how big is the network, is because it's a collection of separately run smaller computer networks. Now, just like the normal network where we are encrypting the message and we are sending it over network, we have secure wireless networks as well. And in secure wireless networks, we use different protocols like WEP, which uses 128-bit keys, etc., in order to make sure that the communication which is taking place is 100% secure. Now, we have a wireless network and we have a ID which we connect, which we called an SSID, which is a service set identifier. Every wireless network will have its own identity. Just like in an enterprise, you'll have the name of the enterprise and you can use your username and password in order to connect to that wireless network. Now, if you need to connect between the two parties through the internet connection, we use a thing called VPN, which is a virtual private network. A virtual private network is a private network that uses public network, usually the internet, to connect multiple locations. Now, how the internet works: the internet transmits data from one computer to another, called a host, to another. Now, it uses different protocols in order to communicate. Just to name it, it's a transmission control protocol, which is a TCP protocol. It's a widely used transport layer protocol that is the most internet applications would use using an IP address in order to communicate with two parties. If the receiving computer is on a network in which the first computer is directly connected, it can send the message directly. If a receiving and sending computers are not directly connected, the sending computer relays the message to another computer which forwards it. So if we are sending a message from here or we want to connect to Facebook, we'll have to communicate through the internet. It would reach to a router. If it does not have the information about the Facebook, it would transmit it to another one, and it would keep on hopping unless you'll reach the page which is of Facebook. A message can pass through a dozen or more forwarders on its way as one part of the internet to another. So if some nodes on the internet are down, messages can still be sent via another route. As you can see that a computer is trying to send a communication using a router gateway. So it has three communication mediums. It can communicate using three different gateways. And the communication medium, which is the smallest and the fastest, it would automatically adapt it in order to reach the host computer number 4. Now, in order to connect to a computer, you must have a uniform resource link, which we call as a URL. So if we are accessing any website, for example, www.google.com or amazon.com, it is called a URL. Now, URL is different for every different website. There are some top level domains as well, just like we have some websites which are ending on amazon.com as .com, or if it is an educational institution, it would have a website like edu. If it's a government institution, it would be ending with .gov, and then if it's a networking organization, it would have .net. If it is a normal organization, its URL would be ending like .org, and there is another URL which is ended with SCOT, which is a Scot, related to Scotland and Scottish culture, etc. Now, when we are talking about internet applications and web, etc., we'll have to understand that there are different internet service providers as well. Any company that provide people and organization and access to the internet. So if you want to access the internet, you'll have to communicate the local carrier which is providing internet and other communication devices, etc. So they'll provide you a username and password, and you'll be able to connect to their network using the 4G or 5G connection or the fiber optic connection. So the internet provided by these companies or the company which is providing internet is called an internet service provider. Now, internet applications is World Wide Web, often confused with the internet. The World Wide Web was conceived as a document management system. Numerous applications have been added to such stream. For example, if you want to watch any videos, these are often referred to Web 2.0. The web browser is used to access and read the web pages, which are usually written in a language which is a hypertext markup language, or we call it HTML. Now, in HTML, as you know, that there are different tags that we use in order to highlight the headings, bullet points, and other things. Most of the pages that you see on the internet are written on HTML. Now they are talking about web browsers as well. A web browser is a software that creates a unique hypermedia based menu or a computer system that provides a graphical user interface for the web. So if you want to browse any website, you'll have to use a browser. The normal and the most common used browsers are, for example, Chrome from Google, and then we have Firefox Mozilla as well, which is quite famous. If you want to access the internet, you'll have to use certain browsers. Now there are certain applets which are small embedded programs inside the websites. Usually they come in the Java applets, etc. So if you want to load any specific information, we use those applets in order to load that information. Now the World Wide Web was developed by the Internal Document Management System. WWW or W3 has grown a collection of tens of thousands to independently owned computers that work together, and that's what we call an internet service. These computers are called web servers, on which we are hosting our websites, are called web servers, are scattered all over the world and contain every imaginable type of data that you can find. So if I'm developing a website or an application, I need to host it somewhere. If I'm developing it on my computer, it will be accessible either on my computer or maybe on my LAN within the building. But if you want that application to be accessible globally, where everyone from the world will be able to access and get the benefit of it, we'll have to host it on a web server. Now web server is a paid service on which we'll host our website, and then it would be accessible to everyone in the world. Because of its ability to handle multimedia objects, including linking multimedia objects distributed as web servers around the world, the web has become the most popular mean of information access, which has grown today. So we are having the website which has videos, which has audio files, which have PowerPoint, PDF, all sort of documents which can be accessed through the internet. Now in order to get all that information and in order to search the information, we have search engines. Now search engine is a tool which use crawlers in order to collect the information from the websites. Now all the websites will have the meta tag, which is a tag about the information of the website. So these crawlers will get that information and would list them on Google, for example, or Yahoo search engine or Amazon search engine, through which if you are searching the information about computers, you'll be able to get all the information related to those computers. It uses a language in the background which helps them in finding and linking all the new websites which are appearing on the websites. There are lots of benefits of the search engines, because the information which you don't know or you don't have information about those specific websites, the search engines helps them in finding and listing them over there, so that we can generate different reports, we can write reports, we can collect the information and data using these search engines. The web is a menu-based system that uses the client-server model. It organizes the internet resources through the world in a series of menu pages screens that appear on the computer. Data exists on the web in ASCII characters, word processing files, audio files, graphic files, etc. Now hypertext allows the linking of certain words to the web page, or when the user will click on them to access a related material. So in order to link the pages within your website or to other pages which are outside your website, you'll have some hyperlinks. These are usually links on which if you'll click, it would take you outside the website or it would take you to another page within the website. Suppose you have built different pages on your website and you need to link them to each other, so that if a person is clicking on about the company, it would end up on a page which is talking about the company. Now if it is clicking on the staff members, it would take you to a page where the list of all the staff members is there. So the way we are linking these pages together is via links, which we call it hyperlink. Now there are different programming languages which are used in order to make the applications. Some people use Java, then C, C++, ASP, ASP.NET, you'll have Python, C#, VB scripts, PHP. There are lots of different languages. Now the choice of programming languages really depends what kind of application you are developing and what is the backend database that you'll be connecting. For example, if you want to connect a MySQL database, which is an open database, you need to use a PHP application, which is also an open source application. So through that you will be able to easily communicate with the database online. Now the internet, the content is developed in a rich text format and different information is displayed on the website using different tools. We use certain things for data repositories online, where we can store the things and we can search the things in a secure manner, and it would be accessible everywhere. Out of those applications, first of all, we have the internet services which are provided by different companies. For example, from Gmail, or your organization would have its own Exchange server from Microsoft, which would be online, and you'll be able to access your emails within the organization and from outside the organization, and the emails and everything will be accessible to everyone. Then we have Telnet, which enables you to log on to another computer on the internet to gain access to their publicly available files. Telnet is particularly useful for pursuing library holdings and large databases. It is also called a remote logon. Then we have FTP, which is a file transfer protocol. It is used to transfer files between the computers. A protocol that describes a file transfer process between the host and a remote computer and allows users to copy the files from one computer to another. So if you have some files which are of bigger size and you want to download it remotely, you'll provide an FTP link, and the users will be able to reach those FTP links and they'll be able to download the files. Now, some files are publicly available. For some files, you'll have to provide a username and password in order to access or to download the files. When we are talking about downloading the files from the internet, we cannot forget the cloud computing. Now, cloud computing is a computing environment where software and storage, etc., are provided as an internet service and are accessed via the web browser. So those are the cloud services which are publicly available. Some services are called public cloud computing, where you will be able to access the resources using the internet, and the hosts are usually quite famous in the market, which are Amazon, from Cisco, from VMware. So they have their own clouds. You can utilize their services in order to host your infrastructure, your applications, your servers, or your entire IT infrastructure can be shifted to the cloud. The excellent feature about cloud computing is that your data is safe. You don't have to worry about the maintenance of it. You don't need to hire the expert for that. You don't need to worry about the security of it, backups. So your data is always secure and available online, because there are multiple backups of the applications which are hosted in the cloud. You'll read lots of things like infrastructure as a service, where the entire infrastructure will be in the cloud, software as a service, where you are using any softwares like Office 365, or you have Google Cloud, or you have the Google Drive, through which you are guessing or accessing the services from there. Then we have platform as a service, where we will use the complete platform, our entire infrastructure and things like that, computers and environment will be there on the cloud. So we'll be accessing it through the internet, and we'll be hosting our own applications over there. Then there is a private cloud computing. Private cloud computing means that you'll have your own private cloud in which only the data related to your organization will be available. It will be accessible only to the guys within the organization, and no one else will be able to access. So though it would be on the internet, but only selected users will be able to access the private cloud. Now we have intranet and extranet. Intranet is a network within an organization only, which is accessible within the organization. Now there are lots of things in the organization. If you have an HR database or an application which is hosted within the organization and you don't want anyone else to access it from outside, that would be hosted in an intranet. So it's a secure network where it is accessible to the people within the network. Anyone from the internet, etc., won't be able to get access to it. Now there is another thing which we called an extranet. Extranet is a network which is accessible between the business parties. For example, if you are manufacturing something and you need to get some raw material from the other company, so both companies would trust each other, and the other company will be able to access the resources like the raw material details, etc., of the company number one, so that it can provide the raw material as soon as it would go low on stock. So an intranet is an internal company network built using the internet and World Wide Web standards and products. So the products and the protocols would be the same that we use on the internet, but it will be used only within the network. When selected externals such as suppliers are given access to the intranet, it becomes an extranet. So the internet, where it is accessible to anyone, there is no username and password. In an intranet, there is a username and password, and the employees and the managers can access it. The extranet will have a username and password where the employees, managers, and business partners can access it. At the end, your book is talking about Internet of Things. Internet of Things is a network of physical objects or things embedded with sensors, processors, software, and network connectivity to enable them to exchange data with manufacturer of the device, device operators, and other connected devices, etc. Sensors are being installed in every variety of machine and products, ranging from the home appliances to cars to clothing and to the grocery items. So using the IoT technology, they'll be able to keep track of the items and what's the overall performance of it. Now, with the passage of time, since IoT is getting very popular, it is able to communicate directly on the internet, and it's updating the manufacturers that where is the actual product. There won't be any problem about the warranty details and the things related to the items and their distribution, etc. It is used for asset monitoring in construction, agriculture, manufacturing, predictive maintenance, retailing, traffic monitoring, etc. So with the passage of time, we'll see it everywhere on the network. Now that's a summary. We have talked about the telecommunications, that's the electric communication of the signals. Then we have guided transmission media like twisted pair cables, coaxial, fiber optic cables, etc. Then we have the wireless communication like microwave link and radio links. Then we talked about network types, which is a personal area network, local area network, metropolitan area network, wide area networks, and the international networks and mesh networking, etc. Then we discuss about the client server systems. There are different communication protocols used to govern and exchange the information. Then we talked about the internet, which is a collection of interconnected networks. World Wide Web is a menu-based system that organizes the internet resources. Then we have hypertext markup language, which is an HTML standard, and a search engine, which is a tool in order to search the things. The internet applications are for the web, email, FTP, telnet, intranet, and extranet. So that was about our computer networks. That's it for today. Thank you very much.